Thanks for joining me again. This is Danny Cardwell from ThoughtWrestler.blogspot.com. This is part 4 of the Race Issues series, and this is going to focus on communication. I titled it Talking Past Each Other. Over the course of this series, I've tried to give an insight, or at least my perspective, on some of the race issues that we face as a nation and the way I have perceived some of these issues. And I could be dead wrong about parts or all of what I've said up to this episode. And I could be wrong about everything I say in this episode. But talking past each other and the communication issues that we face, are based on sometimes our experiences and what we see in the world. You could say something clearly and plainly to a person and have that misinterpreted, not because of some fault of yours, but because of what the other person maybe brings into the conversation. Likewise, you can misunderstand someone's clearly spoken intentions, and because of your background and because of the things that you bring into the conversation, you can misinterpret what they've said. And the talking past each other is why every time we hear, the nation, as a nation, we need to have a national conversation on something. Well, you can't have a conversation if, even though we're all speaking one language, if we're not understanding the frames of that language in the same way. And, linguistically speaking, that's often what happens. Our frames are off. Our points of reference are different. And the way we say things and hear things is often different. A couple months back, I had two very close friends of mine, white guys, go to a hip-hop show. And it was, they had a great time at the show, but one thing one of my buddies talked to me about, he said, but, we were way underdressed. Like, we showed up, we're wearing Docker shorts, t-shirts, tennis shoes. And he said when we got to the show, there were people in, suits. There were people wearing slacks and, nice shirts. He said the women were dressed fine, and, makeup, hair, nails, everything. And, that's just a cultural difference. There's nothing wrong in that. There's nothing inherently wrong with not knowing that. I point to when Seinfeld was on. Seinfeld was the #1 TV show in the country, and yet it ranked somewhere near 50 among African Americans. There's nothing wrong with that. We, as people, as much as we try to be the same and similar, culturally, there are differences. There are things that some people find funny that other people don't. There are things that, interest some people that don't interest others. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just got to accept that there are differences, and then move forward. And when we always hear this talk about national conversation, my first thought is, well, who determines who gets to speak? Whose perspective are we speaking from? Usually race issues are talked about in the media by, men wearing $2,000 suits who live on the outskirts of society that aren't really dealing with everyday life in a way that the average citizen is. You have an isolated, select group of people that get to speak on behalf of everyone, and their experiences in life are completely different than the average everyday person's experience. Michael Jordan goes to a grocery store is completely different than I go to a grocery store. I recently was commenting on a blog, and someone made the distinction about police brutality, and they said, and I'm almost quoting verbatim, "You never hear of black men getting shot wearing suits leaving out of the Hilton." And I guess there's some truth to that. No one gets shot wearing a suit leaving out of a 4-star, 5-star resort. I mean, rarely you hear of that. But at the same time, and I think what the commenter didn't take into perspective as he was typing his comment, is that that same guy in the suit leaving the Hilton could maybe just want to go to the gym. And he could just maybe be tired, sweaty, with a tank top on and some shorts and some running shoes and leaving out the gym. Now, the image that he's projecting on society is completely different than that of wearing a suit and a tie. I could throw on a do-rag and a wife beater right now, put on my darker tinted glasses, and substantively I'd be the same person, but from a phenomenological perspective, I would be projecting outwardly something different. And it could be that it's just sunny outside. I've got tinted glasses on. I've got a wife beater on because it's hot. And I could be wearing a do-rag because I'm trying to hold my hair down. But the fact that you have to explain that in the sense that allows you to justify, your existence. Why are you dressed like that? I can't possibly take you seriously dressed like that. That shows itself to a culture in which we've grown comfortable lumping people in groups together. Now, with that said, I wouldn't feel comfortable walking down the street during a neo-Nazi parade. If I was walking down the street and I saw 4 or 5 guys with SS armbands on and swastikas, I would rightly feel a little different too. And the uniform of the streets in the hip-hop generation, sometimes the fashion and the fashion statements have been uniformed into a thug culture that doesn't leave room for non-judgment. I went to school in a rural area in the 90s, and I knew white kids that dressed in baggy shorts, long t-shirts, and do-rags. And these kids wouldn't harm a fly. I knew black kids that dressed the same way. The only difference is that, the exceptions in society given to those kids. Most kids, the hyper-racialized way we see white kids in this dress, they're viewed in one way, but they're also viewed as harmless. So you could say they're wannabes or any of the other negative derogatory words used to describe them, but they're often described as harmless, whereas their black counterparts are seen as a threat. And I don't know how we get past that. It's an exception that, other minorities aren't afforded. And, to make this point, during 9/11, after the terrorist attacks in New York, Pennsylvania, and at Pentagon, Muslim Americans and Indian Americans, even Sikhs around this country, found themselves victims of harassment and sometimes violent crimes because they were lumped into a group with people that committed atrocious crimes. Whereas, if you think about Sandy Hook, a week after Sandy Hook, a white father could show up at an elementary school, pick his child up from school, and maybe not arouse the level of fear that symbolically we saw associated with, brown-skinned people of Middle Eastern descent. So these are real things, and there's no resolution that I'm offering. Again, with my videos, it's not that I've got a set of answers that I'm willing to give to people. My whole point is that, arm yourself with as much information as possible and know that these things are real. Again, usually when someone says we've gotten past race is not an issue in this country, they're speaking from a privileged perspective. It's usually someone on a TV that, with a $2,000 suit on, lives in some sort of gated community, insulated from the rest of the world with a security detail. You never hear people at a street level say that there aren't, issues dealing with race still going on in this country. And as far as, racism towards whites, that's a real thing. There are some very well-meaning and intentioned white people that have been accused of racism based on, political positions they hold or, ideology. And, that's just as injurious to the person. No one likes to be assessed, and no one likes to have their total life's value judged on a whim or on one set of criteria. And so, we've got to find a way to understand that. And again, it's internal. Each of us as an individual has to understand that this struggle is real, that these things happen, and how genuine is my struggle against it. How hard will I work not to see someone as my enemy? And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining me. Please support the blog, thoughtwrestler.blogspot.com. Peace.